Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Steve Larsen, and you're listening to a special segment of Sales Funnel Radio. Now, a lot of you have asked, hey, Steven, how do I set up a podcast, or how do I publish, or how do you come up with things to say every single time, and how do you get consistent with this? You know, what's your routine? What kind of mic do you use? How do you know what to say? How do you know how you should say it? You know, and all those different aspects. And I'm excited for this episode. I think you guys are going to enjoy it because I've had a lot of questions, and I'm going to drop some answers here.
Welcome to Sales Funnel Radio, where you'll learn marketing strategies to grow your online business using today's best internet sales funnels. And now, here's your host, Steve Larsen.
All right, you guys, I'm really excited for this. Now, right off the bat, I'll tell you, this episode, I'm calling it the power of publishing, and I've talked about this before in the past. I've talked about how publishing is power. It helps you with so many things. But what I don't want you to think is that, my podcast is growing like crazy. It's definitely not the top podcast out there. I know it's not. But my podcast is really only it's only 10 months old. I mean, really? Maybe actually not even that. the first month I had, I think 1,100 downloads. Then it was all organic. 1,100 downloads, then 1,400 downloads, then went to 3,000, then 4,000, then jumped up to 5,000 in a month, and then it did this massive spike and went to 8,000 in a month and over 9,000. And we're not even halfway through this month as it is. And I can tell we're going to blow past this previous month as well. And it's been a lot of fun. And so please don't think that I'm saying, oh my gosh, I am the expert, I'm the guru. But I have figured out a few things on how this works. And it's been working for me. It's been working great. And the following's been exploding, and you guys have been great. And so I want to show you guys and beg you and urge you that in your personal business and in the things that you're doing, whether it's a business or you just feel the need to podcast or publish or whatever, video, like I'm saying, audio, anything, written. I don't really like to write that much unless it's a sales letter or sales copy. But some people like that. Whatever it is, choose some kind of platform and just stick to it. The weirdest things begin to happen. The coolest things begin to happen. You become an authority figure. You become somebody, you start to build a tribe. I think one of the coolest aspects of this and why I've enjoyed it so much, is because I have perfected my own craft far more. Selfishly, it's one of the major reasons I wanted to do the podcast in the first place, and it's worked. Holy crap, it's worked. It's worked really, really well. I helped do the fulfillment for Russell Brunson's 2 Comma Club coaching program. And once a week for about 4 hours every week, we jump on and I do a 4-hour Q&A call, and we dive into people's businesses and help them create products that will, we're trying to help them make $1 million with that product. And it's really cool, super unique offer. But after probably 6 or 7 times, I turned to Russell and I was like, dude, one of the coolest aspects of this is that I'm getting better at my own craft. I already knew the material, but the depth and how it fits in all these extra scenarios, is just so amazing. And he's like, yeah, it's one of the coolest reasons. And it's funny because I remember way back in the day, it was probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I decided I knew I needed to start publishing, but I did not want to do it. There was so much huge mental block for me in publishing, because I was like, what do I come up with every single time I do it? How often do I do it? How does it work? How's the tech work? What do I say? How do I say it? And those were all the big questions that I had, and I've got a lot of those questions recently from you. So I'm excited for this episode and how to do it. It's funny, one lady reached out to me shortly after I started this podcast, and she was like, Steven, were you a radio announcer? And I was like, no. She's like, it sounds like you got a radio style voice. I expect to hear your kind of voice on the radio. And I was like, oh, I appreciate that. She's like, keep going. That's awesome. That was one of the first little wins that I had. It was shortly after I started the podcast, and it kept me going. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. But even before I started this, I had a Periscope channel. A lot of you guys probably don't know that about me. I had a Periscope channel. I was I was following Russell Brunson. He had no idea who I was, and we were ridiculously poor. And it was. Anyway, this is a story I was not planning on telling you guys. But I was in a period of college where I was in the middle of my marketing degree, and the things that I was learning on my own was dancing circles around what I was learning in my marketing degree, right? I was learning from guys like Russell. I was learning from guys like, all over the place, Ryan Levesque, Jeff Walker, all over the place, all these people. And I was doing it. I wasn't just learning it. I was, some of my clients were like Paul Mitchell, some of those hair schools, and, $1 billion company. Really, really, just awesome stuff. Really unique for a college student. And I totally get that. And all along, I kept hearing Russell say, you got to start publishing. And that's what he was saying when he would publish. And I was like, nah, I don't want to do that. That's crap. Like, no, I don't want to do that. You know what? I'll do it with that. I know better. That was kind of the attitude I had a little bit. And one day I was just like, fine. You know what? The dude said to do it. I'm going to start publishing regularly. And so what I did is I took out, my phone, and I didn't even know what I was going to say. I just hit go. And I planned out some stuff. I put some things together as far as like the look and the feel. And I was looking at graphics, and I was heavily into, I never did any sports in high school or anything like that. I was always like in theater. I was on stage a lot. I was in a lot of, actually you guys probably don't know about me either. I sang a lot from 4th grade all the way through like halfway through college. I sang a lot. And so I took the lead in a lot of musicals and stuff like that. And I was a lot of stage time, and I was a head editor for Yearbook doing a lot of layout design, and got a lot of state awards, Colorado State Awards for my layout designs and things like that. It was really, really fun. It's super cool. Like I enjoyed what I did. I do regret that I didn't do a sport, but honestly, it's really helped with all the other things I've been doing though. And fast forward, when it came time for me to actually start publishing, I was scared to death. And I had to lean on a lot of the other talents that I had developed over the time to try and deliver stuff that's interesting that people could listen to. And you've probably thought that, and if you're listening to this podcast right now, you've probably thought that before. You're like, oh, I should probably podcast, you know what I mean? So one of the things I love is just it helps you get more and more clear on your craft itself. The interaction is insane. And honestly, yeah, as I was reading this, I was just writing out a list of the benefits of publishing frequently. And really, though, what it boiled down to was 2 separate things. And I guarantee you will always need these things. You are never done with them. And the first thing that you need is you got to find your voice. You have to find your voice. I remember it was so funny. It was probably like about 2 or 3 months ago. I was listening back to some of my first episodes ever on this podcast. And I was like, ugh, like, oh crap, like that's what I sounded like. Oh my gosh, that was not a good story or whatever. And I leaned over to Russell. I was like, dude, I think I'm going to delete the first few episodes of my podcast. They're not very good, And very, very sensibly does, Russell turn with this level of fervor. And he turned to me. I still remember this. He looked at me. He goes, no. He goes, don't delete it. He's like, that is part of your story. He's like, you need to leave it on there. That's part of your journey, man. That you need, people want to know that about you, that, oh my gosh, he didn't turn out with this, with whatever, he wasn't born perfect. He wasn't born in a suit, you know what I mean? And you become real and you become vulnerable. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. And it's super helpful. So that's the number one true benefit, I believe, of publishing frequently is you find your voice. You figure out your own personality. You get really, really comfortable with who you are and what you say and how you say it and the stories you tell and the analogies and the principles behind here and the way you start and the way you end, the way you address your audience, the way they interact with you back and forth. I mean, it is so incredibly important because in the future, when you decide you need to go sell something, you know how to do it and they have heard you do it before, right? They've heard your voice. It's not new. You get past the crock brain easier, All right, so that's number one. Second thing is distribution. You create a following. Like I said, it's really, really fun. This podcast now is at a time where it's the moment I publish it, within the first day or two, there's already 400 or 500 people that have downloaded it. And I know that's not huge or whatever, but it's not, it's not small either. I know that it's growing a lot and it's been a lot of fun too. So it's super cool. Anyway, so to me, when I think about publishing and I think about, specifically podcasting for me, it has become like this therapeutic thing. I didn't want to do it. And several years ago, I went to Russell's funnel hacking live event, and he was like, you got to publish, start a podcast, start publishing. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm not going to do it. And I was like, fine. I guess he has more money than I do. I should probably listen to him, and I got really fine, whatever. I'm going to do it, and it was almost out of annoyance. I was like, God, let me put this podcast together, freaking thing, and I put it together and I was like, crap, what do I do? How do I actually execute something, how do I execute publishing in general, let alone a podcast? And I remember I just started thinking of stories. I was like, okay, what does every publisher, someone who regularly publishes, what's a blog post? Okay, usually there's a story and there's some kind of principle in there. Okay, I'll kind of follow that format. And then it got more and more in depth and more in depth and what I put into the podcast and how I kind of structure them. And sometimes they're just ad lib. I know there's stuff on my mind and I got to get it out. And sometimes they're just, more for me than it is for you. And then other times I plan the whole thing out and I get it going. And, like this episode right here, it's a full page of notes. I got a lot of cool tips for you guys on how to publish podcasts and publish in general. And I'm excited to jump into it here, taking a little bit. What's funny though is I was so nervous. This is going to happen to you. If you've not ever published before, it's going to happen to you. I was so scared that what I was going to put out there wasn't good enough, that I confused action with success. I confused action with progress. And so what I did is I must have had 13, 14 episodes done and ready, and still I had not launched the podcast. I mean, it was, there was that much mental angst for me. I was just like, am I good enough? Is this good enough? I think these are really good. Like what I'm saying in there is real. Maybe my delivery is not polished enough yet. Maybe I'm not the best at it yet, but like, I know this thing right here works. I should talk about it on a podcast, but I was so afraid I wouldn't launch it for a really long time. And so I remember, there was 2 dates I set. I was like, okay, coming up, I'm going to launch this podcast. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so good. Okay, here's the date. I'm going to do it on this date. Here it comes. And I had to psych myself up about it. And I went. And the date came, and here it was. It was the day away. Date came, here it was, and the date went, and the date left, and I didn't launch the podcast. And I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. Why am I so scared? Okay, what are they going to do? What are they going to say? So what? Okay, okay. And then I went, and then I published the podcast, and I put 3 of them out at once because iTunes cares how many episodes people are listening to. And so if someone listens to the first episode and they like it and there's not a second one for them to listen to, you already shoot yourself in the foot, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm going to launch with 3 episodes. I'll tell a story. And I was like, you know what? And honestly, I don't know that I'm good enough. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go interview other people. And that's what I did. And I lined up, I think it was probably 9 interviews. So if you listen to the first 20 episodes of the podcast, about 8 or 9 of them, are interviews. And I thought, you know what? And this is not true at all. Every single one of you have got something that is awesome inside of you that can bless somebody else's life. I'm telling you that belief that I had before, that I had nothing of value to give, was false. And it's false for you if you believe that. It's not true. You have something that is of worth to humanity, okay, to your market. And I'm so sad that I had that belief and I didn't launch it with more gusto, but it was just something I had to get over internally. And so what I did is I just started interviewing other people around the subject of sales funnels. That is literally why I did those interviews in the beginning of this podcast. And some of you guys have asked, okay, well, Stephen, how come you haven't done interviews since? Well, what was funny is when I started learning the pattern of how to publish and how to put value in the marketplace and how to pull people together and how to speak and how to have, confidence and all that stuff. You know what I mean? I always reference this, but Robert Kiyosaki says, and it's always stuck with me, with the moment you move down a path of entrepreneurship, your character flaws blow up in your face. Well, it's no different for any kind of publishing either. And I had to get over myself, And what was funny, so I went and I launched all these different episodes, and I was like, wow, sweet. People are liking it. That's really cool. And iTunes has 42 days for you to get on the new and noteworthy section. And I was like, cool. Let me get out there. And there's a few people that say, hey, if you don't hit new and noteworthy section, that you should just abandon. You should just abandon the podcast, and I do not agree with that. Now, it depends on the podcast and the purpose of the podcast. For me, this is me sharing with you tricks and tips that I am using to build cool sales funnels. I've built over 170 of them in the last year alone, working for Russell Brunson, and I've got I had my own clients, and I kind of left that path so I could focus on, you guys with this podcast, and specifically working with ClickFunnels and with Russell Brunson. So as his funnel builder. So, but before that, before I ever worked for Russell, before anybody else, I had my own clientele, and it was awesome. And it's how I broke into the industry. And so that's the purpose for this podcast. And so I don't think that by you missing new and noteworthy section that you should abandon the entire project. I think you're still going to help find the voice. You're still going to create a distribution channel. You're still going to go make your own craft more perfect by you learning how to teach it, and coach other people through it. So anyway, so what I wanted to jump in here real quick now. So all I was trying to say in the past is just have some courage with it, and just know that you will always have haters no matter what. I am blown away at the number of people who take the time out of their freaking day to come tell me that they didn't like something I did. And I was like, what on earth? Like, you just got to be prepared, okay? Here's the metrics, okay? 10% of your following are going to be slimy thieves who just take crap from you and never want to pay for anything and think that you owe them everything. That's just how it works, okay? Just plan on that. When you start in any kind of entrepreneur suit, 10% of them are going to be the slime balls. And I don't care calling them out that way because, I put a lot of sweat and tears into my own, not tears, they're man tears, right? But I put a lot of time and a lot of effort into things that I produce, and I know that they're good. And if someone comes to me and says, hey, that's not good, I think I should steal it. Russell told me once, if people are willing to steal your stuff, it means that you did it right because there's so much desire to have it. And I was like, okay. All right, 10%, you dirtbags, go take it. You know what I mean? And so you just need to know when you start publishing, like, people are going to steal your crap. All right, so that's one of the metrics. The other metric is that 10% of your following is going to become your raving fans. They are going to share your stuff. They're going to go on Facebook when you post things, and they're going to reshare them and post them. They're going to talk about you. They're going to do shout outs. They're going to go and they're going to say, oh my gosh, Stephen, like, that was amazing. I absolutely loved what you did this last thing. That helped me here, here, and here. And it is fuel, and you've got to learn to love that, and you've got to learn to attach yourself to it. It's such a good feeling. It's so cool. It's fun to know and legitimately know that there are people's lives that have changed because I started this podcast. And it's going to be the same exact thing for you when you decide to consistently start publishing on no matter what. And as long as you're consistent with it and you are honestly trying to solve legitimate problems and help people out, it's going to be a great experience. It's this side benefit I just was not expecting, to be honest. And there's been times where I just fall asleep at night. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, man, that last episode was so good. And sure enough, people will come reach out to you and they'll be like, oh man, that was so sweet. Like, thanks so much. That helped a lot. It helped me do X, Y, and Z. And it's this cool community that you have the ability to create as the entrepreneur and the marketer and leader and guru or whatever. And it's very, very exciting. Anyway, I was not meaning on having this be a rant what it's been so far. My notes are completely different on what it is that I'm talking to you guys about right now. But it's all these side things that just are been really, really fun as I've learned how to do all this stuff. And it's been a lot of fun. So with that, let me jump in here real quick to a few quick things, okay? I usually try and keep my podcast no longer than 30 minutes, which to some people is way too long, but whatever, it's my style. You know what I mean? You can choose your own. So, all right, so what the biggest question that I get from people is, hey, Stephen, how on earth you, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but they'll say, hey, you got great content. How do you come up with it all the time? Have you ever felt that way? I'm sure you have, especially if you listen to this podcast. My podcast is all about how to sell stuff, and teaching how we are doing it, how I'm doing it. And so part of that is marketing. And what's marketing? Marketing is education and belief rebuilding. That's basically it. You're basically rebuilding belief patterns by educating. That's what marketing is. That's what sales is, in the long run. And so I'm sure you've had that kind of question. So what I do to actually come up with my podcasts or come up with any kind of content creation piece, whether it's an email or whatever, is I will sit back and I got to get passionate about something. And I got to kind of collect my thoughts. And what I do is I go back and I think of it's either a story or an experience or some ridiculous tip that has really helped or increased the bottom line or whatever, increased conversions or something like that. Excuse me. And the trick is that I've got to get myself in the same state that I was in when I had that story happened to me, or when I experienced that tip. And what I have to do is I need to convey enough emotion, and I need to dive into the feeling, and I need to dive into, enough of what was going on around me when I'm telling the story that you start to get in the same state that I was in when I experienced it. And so Russell literally calls this the Epiphany Bridge. If you've ever read the book Expert Secrets, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's one of the best books on how to sell that I've ever read in my life. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. It's true. I have have two huge bookshelves next to me just full of marketing books, and I've read and I've studied like crazy for someone my age, and I know that, and it's not normal, and it still is one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Anyway, so what I do is I literally think through, hey, I've got to come up with, number one, an epiphany bridge. I've got to come up with a story. So number one, the epiphany bridge / story. You know, what's the story, and then what's the lesson that is attached to that, right? And then what I do is I sit down, and the first thing that I do on the podcast is I try to tell the story first. I tell the story first. And it's because I don't want to come right out of the gate and go, did you know you can increase conversion rates by changing your buttons from orange to red? You know, that's not true. But you know what I mean? If I jump right out the gate and I start telling you all this tech stuff, it's going to be really freaking annoying. And so what I do is I got to tell a story. There's got to be pattern interrupt. There's got to be things that I do. Every once in a while I start the episode or I start whatever, I yell. And I get really, really loud and I get intense. And that's literally the entire reason why is because I need a pattern interrupt. I need you to know that this is not like what's happened the rest of your day. You know what I mean? And so I think through a story, I think through some kind of pattern interrupt, certainly the main lesson or nugget. But if I just come out and tell you the nugget, everyone thinks that, oh, just give me the bullet points, just give me the main ideas. And I'm not like that. You know what? I wish that you'd just give me the main points and I'll just walk away. Okay, but everyone I ever just give the main points to, they never go do a dang thing with it. Its story is powerful. You have to hear the story. It's part of the medicine. Okay, it's like the spoon that holds the medicine. All right, and the story is super important to the whole thing. So anyway, I come up with a story, like I said, some kind of lesson with it, and like a hook or some pattern interrupt, whether it's the headline or whatever it is, and that's kind of it, honestly. And my podcast started out, I had a few episodes that were only like 7-8 minutes because I didn't know what else to say. But what I do is, as I'm reading books and as I'm going through courses and as I'm studying other marketers and I'm sitting next to these brilliant minds, and as I'm going, I will have my ears always perked towards what I could say in the podcast. That doesn't mean I steal ideas, but if there's something that's applicable that I know that you guys could benefit from, I sit down and I write it down. I've got a big list of lessons just from Russell, because I sit there next to him, you know, and it's a huge list, and I call them Brunsonisms, and there's just tons and tons of these different lessons that he'll say stuff while he's on another interview or whatever. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was amazing, and I'll write it down. I don't always use it, but sometimes they'll pop up and float into my head in the middle of a podcast episode, or while I'm on an interview with somebody else on their podcast, or whatever it is, and it's super fun. I really enjoy that a lot. So anyways, that's how I come up with the episodes. I hope that helps. The easiest way to do it is for you, this is one of my rules. One of my rules, as you guys are going around and you're studying marketing and you're trying to learn how to sell your product and you're doing all this stuff, one of the biggest rules that has changed my life, and I started it about 10 years ago. Okay, wait. 11 years ago. Wait, when was it? Yeah, it's 10 years ago. Oh my gosh, it's 10 years ago. I remember it to the date. There was a guy who was he was mentoring me, and I was trying to make some changes in my life and all the things I was doing. And he said, you know what you need to do? He said, every time you learn something, now keep in mind, this guy changed my life. I'm fully convinced, and it's a story for another time, but he saved my life. And it was a time I was trying to make just some changes in my life. I didn't like how I was living. I was trying to fix a whole bunch of stuff in my life. And he kind of was this heavy hand. He's kind of a hammer with a pillow around it. You know what I mean? He was blunt. He was extremely forward with me. But what he did is he would sit me down and he would say, all right, here it is, right? And he would say, you guys know I'm religious, okay? And so what he would do is he would sit me down and he would make me read scripture out loud, and he'd make me put a shirt and tie on. And he was a strength trainer for the Denver Broncos football team. Big dude. This guy was massive, and he would put 1,000 pounds on his back and carry it till his nose bled. Like, that's not a joke. All right, he just won the strongest man competition for his weight class in America. Like, ridiculously strong man. And I was super fortunate to have him as a mentor for things other than, his physical training, which is really, really cool. And this is a lesson he taught me that's changed my life forever, and is one of the reasons why I'm able to come up with what I think are pretty good episodes for this podcast. And he said, here's the rule: learn for 2. That's it. That's the secret, you guys, to content creation, in my opinion, and how I come up with these podcasts. It becomes the foundation for everything. Learn for two people, meaning when I'm reading a book, when I'm going through a video course, when I'm attending a seminar, when I'm talking to somebody, anytime I'm doing anything and I'm trying to learn, or even when I'm not, my ears are perked open and I'm learning for the next guy I'm going to teach it to. I literally envision myself teaching this from stage. A lot of times you guys don't know this because it's audio. I have my eyes closed when I'm doing my podcast, envisioning that I'm standing on a stage because I know that I was learning it, envisioning that I would teach it on a stage. Does that make sense? And so what I would do is I'd go read through all these books and I'd go through these courses and I would think through myself and go, okay, how would I teach it to the next guy? How would I teach it to the next guy? And I'm convinced that's one of the reasons I sit next to Russell Brunson, because in college and way back in the day when I was doing door-to-door sales, all these things, I literally was thinking to myself, it was a conscious thought. How do I teach the next guy what I'm learning right now? You know the depth you begin to learn when you do that? It's amazing. The depth is insane because you're learning it with this almost like a mantle that gets placed on you. You have this responsibility to teach it to the other guy. Now, is that always true? No, but if you act like it is, and I learn for two, then I'm constantly in pursuit of what I can share with other people that is of value. I have quotes all over my wall. I literally write them on legal pieces of paper and I thumbtack them to the wall. And when I was in high school, I did that too. And I'd cover my walls literally so you couldn't see the wall of just quotes. And I can't remember where the quote is. I'm looking on my wall right now. I can't find it. But anyways, one of the quotes is that basically anytime you open your mouth and you communicate, you're either taking up space or you're adding value. And that's the key, is that if you want to add value, you have got to start learning for two. Well, how do you come up with consistent, awesome content? You everything you do, learn. It's not like things just come to you all the time, right? You got to dig the well before you're thirsty. You've got to put stuff in the well. So start learning for two. That is one of the biggest tips I can tell you for content creation that I mean ever. And so when Russell Brunson hired me, when they called and I couldn't believe it, they're like, hey, we want to offer you the job. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? I made a conscious choice right after that phone call. I remember this. I was like, how am I going to make the most of this opportunity that is just insane? Well, I'm going to learn for two. And I remember that went into my head. I was driving my car. I was going back home after the interview and I had that conscious thought. I'm going to learn for two. And doing that put more responsibility on my shoulders, but it also helped me formulate ideas and put pieces of things together. Okay, this guru over here, they said this, and this guru over here, they said this, and it pulled this together. And some of you guys have come out and you've said, Steven, how come you can quote so many other people in their books? Well, that's why. Learn for two. Okay. Anyways, that's not in my notes. Again, ad lib. But that's been a huge piece for me. So now that you guys know how I come up with my content itself, what I want to do is I'm actually going to take a break here for just a second. And on the next episode, I'm going to share with you guys how I actually put it together. I want to tell you guys how I actually, what kind of mic I use, how I actually get it transcribed, how I get it published to like 15 different places with a single click. You know what I mean? Really, really cool and powerful stuff. I just... for the fear of this being an extremely long podcast, I'm going to break it into 2 episodes here. So anyways, stay tuned to the next podcast here. I'm going to push it out at the same time with this one. I just want to make sure I break it up here. All right, guys.
Thanks for listening to Sales Funnel Radio. Please remember to subscribe and leave feedback. Want to get one of today's best internet sales funnel for free? Go to salesfunnelbroker.com/free funnels to download your pre-built sales funnel today.